Something unprecedented is happening in the UK housing market right now. After years of being priced out, squeezed by rising costs, and watching from the sidelines, first-time buyers are suddenly becoming the most powerful force in property. The data that just came through is turning everything we thought we knew about homeownership completely upside down. If you want to stay ahead of every twist and turn in the UK property market, smash that like button and subscribe to Property Reporter. We're bringing you the latest housing and economic news before anyone else. The numbers are staggering. In January alone, first-time buyers took out nearly 18,000 mortgages. That's not just a slight increase, that's a seismic shift. To put this in perspective, this figure is almost double what we saw during the same period last year. While the media has been focused on doom and gloom stories about the housing market collapse, something entirely different has been brewing beneath the surface. These buyers aren't waiting anymore. They're not sitting on the fence hoping for better conditions. They're jumping in with both feet, and they're doing it at a pace we haven't witnessed in years. What makes this even more remarkable is who's actually managing to get on the ladder. The average first-time buyer is now purchasing a property worth £204,000. Think about that for a moment. Just a few years ago, experts were saying that young people would never be able to afford homes at these price points. Yet here they are, not only affording them, but doing so in record numbers. The typical deposit these buyers are putting down is £36,000. That's a massive sum of money, and it tells us something crucial about the determination and financial discipline of this generation. They've been saving, planning, and waiting for their moment, and that moment is right now. But here's where it gets really interesting. The surge isn't happening by accident. Mortgage rates have been playing a critical role in opening the floodgates. We've seen average two-year fixed rates drop from 6.1% down to 5.4% in recent months. For a five-year fix, rates have fallen from 5.8% to 5.2%. These might seem like small changes on paper, but in reality, they represent thousands of pounds in savings over the life of a mortgage. When you're a first-time buyer trying to stretch every penny, those differences are absolutely massive. Lower rates mean lower monthly payments, which means more people can suddenly afford to make that leap into home ownership. The market conditions are creating a perfect storm of opportunity. Sellers are becoming more realistic about pricing. Properties are staying on the market longer, which gives buyers more negotiating power than they've had in years. The days of bidding wars and gazumping on every halfway decent property are fading away. Instead, first-time buyers are finding themselves in a position where they can actually take their time, view multiple properties, and make sensible decisions without the pressure of losing out to cash buyers or investors. This shift in power dynamics is something we haven't seen since before the pandemic, and it's fundamentally changing who controls the market. There's another factor driving this boom that most people aren't talking about. The rental market has become so expensive and unstable that buying has actually become the more sensible option for many people. When you're paying £1,500 or more per month in rent with nothing to show for it, suddenly a mortgage payment of a similar amount starts looking incredibly attractive. You're building equity, you have security, and you're not at the mercy of a landlord who might decide to sell up or hike the rent at any moment. The psychological shift from seeing home ownership as impossible to seeing renting as the worst option has been huge. People are doing the math and realizing that staying in the rental trap is costing them more in the long run than taking the plunge into buying. Government schemes and support programs are also playing their part. Help to Buy, though winding down in some forms, has enabled thousands of people to get that crucial first step onto the ladder. Shared ownership schemes are becoming more popular and better understood. First-time buyer stamp duty relief, which exempts properties up to £300,000 from stamp duty, is saving buyers thousands right at the point when they need it most. The Lifetime ISA is another tool that's been quietly helping people save, offering a 25% government bonus on savings up to £4,000 per year. When you add all these elements together, you create an environment where first-time buyers have more support and more roots into home ownership than they've had in decades. Regional variations are telling an even more fascinating story. While London remains notoriously difficult for first-time buyers, other parts of the country are seeing absolute explosions in activity. The Northwest, Yorkshire, and parts of Scotland are becoming hotspots where first-time buyers can actually afford family homes rather than just tiny flats. Cities like Manchester, Liverpool, and Leeds are seeing unprecedented levels of first-time buyer activity. These areas offer something crucial that London and the South East often can't: genuine affordability combined with strong employment prospects. The work-from-home revolution hasn't disappeared, and it's given people the freedom to look beyond the traditional expensive hotspots. Why pay £400,000 for a one-bedroom flat in London when you can get a three-bedroom house with a garden in Manchester for the same price or less? The acceleration is continuing into this year as well. Data from the first quarter shows that the momentum isn't slowing down, it's actually building. Mortgage approvals for first-time buyers in February and March have remained strong, suggesting this isn't just a January blip or a temporary phenomenon. Lenders are competing aggressively for first-time buyer business, which is driving rates down even further and creating more attractive products specifically designed for this market. Some lenders are now offering 95% mortgages again with reasonable rates, something that seemed unthinkable just a couple of years ago. The combination of competition among lenders, government support, and sheer demand from buyers is creating a self-reinforcing cycle. What does this mean for the broader housing market? When first-time buyers dominate, the entire chain starts moving differently. Those first-time buyer properties, typically smaller homes and flats, start selling quickly. This then allows those sellers to move up the ladder, freeing up family homes. Those sellers can then move to even larger properties or down size, creating movement throughout the entire market. For years, the UK housing market has been criticised for being stagnant, with people unable to move because there are no buyers at the bottom of the ladder. That blockage is now clearing, and the effects are rippling upward. Estate agents are reporting that chains are actually completing, properties are selling, and the market feels more alive than it has in years. But there are challenges and questions remaining. Can this pace continue? House prices are still high by historical standards, and while affordability has improved slightly, we're not exactly in bargain territory. Interest rates, though lower than their recent peaks, could still move in either direction depending on inflation and Bank of England policy. If rates start climbing again, some of these first-time buyers might find themselves stretched. There's also the question of supply. The UK has a chronic shortage of housing, and while demand from first-time buyers is strong, there simply aren't enough homes being built to meet everyone's needs. This mismatch could push prices up again, potentially pricing out the very people who are finally getting their chance. Another element to consider is the quality and location of the properties first-time buyers are purchasing. Are they getting good value, or are they being forced to compromise on space, location, or condition because it's their only way in? Some experts worry that in the rush to get on the ladder, buyers might be taking on properties that will be difficult to sell later or that will require expensive repairs. The pressure to buy now before rates change or prices rise can lead to hasty decisions. However, most evidence suggests that first-time buyers today are actually quite savvy. They've grown up with property programs, online resources, and access to information that previous generations never had. They're researching thoroughly, getting surveys done, and making informed choices. The demographic driving this change is also worth examining. Many of these first-time buyers are in their 30s rather than their 20s. They've had longer to save, their careers are more established, and often they're buying as couples with two incomes. This isn't the stereotype of the young 22-year-old graduate buying their first flat. It's people who've been waiting, sometimes for over a decade, and have finally reached a point where buying is possible. There's a sense of determination and even relief in finally achieving something that seemed out of reach for so long. This emotional element shouldn't be underestimated. Home ownership in the UK carries significant psychological weight, representing security, success, and stability in a way that it perhaps doesn't in some other countries. Economic factors beyond just interest rates are also contributing. Wage growth has finally started to outpace inflation in some sectors, meaning people have more disposable income. Employment remains relatively strong despite economic uncertainties. giving people the confidence to take on long-term financial commitments. Consumer confidence, while not sky-high, has stabilized enough that people are willing to make big decisions again. The cost of living crisis, while still affecting many households, has eased slightly from its peak, freeing up money that can go towards saving for a deposit or mortgage payments. Then there's the investment angle. Many first-time buyers are viewing property not just as somewhere to live, but as a crucial investment for their future. With pension prospects looking uncertain for many younger workers and savings rates having been minimal for years, property represents one of the few ways to build real wealth over time. This investment mindset is making people more willing to stretch their budgets and make sacrifices in other areas of their lives to get onto the ladder. They're seeing what happened to prices over the past 20 years and, despite recent wobbles, believe that property will continue to be a solid long-term investment. The spring market is typically the busiest time for property transactions, and all indications suggest this year will be exceptional. Estate agents are reporting packed viewings, multiple offers on well-priced properties, and a general buzz that's been missing from the market. First-time buyers are leading the charge, but their activity is energizing the entire sector. Surveyors, solicitors, mortgage brokers, and removal companies are all seeing increased demand. After several years of doom and gloom predictions, the market feels like it's genuinely recovering, and first-time buyers are the engine driving that recovery. Looking at the data from a historical perspective makes the current situation even more striking. In the aftermath of the financial crisis, first-time buyers represented a much smaller portion of the market. Investors and cash buyers dominated, often outbidding young buyers and turning properties into rentals. The balance has shifted dramatically. First-time buyers now represent the largest group of mortgage borrowers, overtaking home movers and buy-to-let investors. This represents a fundamental rebalancing of the market toward owner-occupation rather than investment, which many housing campaigners have been calling for. It suggests the market is becoming healthier and more accessible to those who actually want to live in the properties rather than just profit from them. Regional house price growth is also being influenced by this first-time buyer surge. Areas with strong first-time buyer activity are seeing more stable, sustainable price growth rather than the wild speculation that characterized some markets in previous years. This is generally positive for market stability. Rapid price increases might make existing owners feel wealthy, but they create affordability crises and often lead to painful corrections. Steady growth, driven by actual people buying homes to live in, is much more sustainable long-term. There are interesting cultural shifts happening as well. The expectation that you must buy in your early 20s or you've failed has diminished. People are more accepting of different timelines and paths to home ownership. At the same time, the desire to own hasn't disappeared, despite some predictions that younger generations would be happy to rent forever. The data clearly shows that when buying becomes possible, people jump at the opportunity. The dream of home ownership is alive and well. It just looks different than it did for previous generations. Buyers are more realistic about starting with smaller properties, being willing to renovate, or buying in up-and-coming rather than established areas. Financial education has improved significantly too. First-time buyers today generally understand mortgages, interest rates, and the true costs of home ownership much better than previous generations did. They're aware of things like maintenance costs, insurance, and the importance of having emergency funds. This financial literacy makes them better prepared for the realities of home ownership and less likely to get into financial difficulty. Lenders have also learned lessons from the past and are generally lending more responsibly, with proper affordability checks and stress testing to ensure buyers can cope with rate increases. Technology is playing its part as well. Online mortgage comparisons, virtual viewings, digital conveyancing, and instant mortgage decisions have made the buying process faster and more transparent. First-time buyers who are generally more tech-savvy are taking full advantage of these tools. They can research areas, compare properties, check crime statistics, look at school ratings, and calculate commute times all before even viewing a property. This efficiency means they can move quickly when they find the right place, giving them an edge in competitive situations. The support networks available to first-time buyers have also expanded. Online communities, forums, and social media groups provide advice, support, and shared experiences. First-time buyers can learn from others who've just been through the process, avoiding common pitfalls and getting recommendations for solicitors, surveyors, and mortgage brokers. This collective knowledge is incredibly valuable and helps level the playing field against more experienced buyers and investors. Looking ahead to the rest of this year, predictions suggest the first-time buyer dominance will continue. Mortgage rates are expected to remain relatively stable or even decrease slightly if inflation continues to moderate. House prices are forecast to see modest growth rather than dramatic increases, which maintains affordability. Supply remains the critical question. If more homes come to market, particularly new builds aimed at first-time buyers, the momentum could accelerate even further. However, if supply tightens while demand remains strong, we could see prices start to climb more rapidly, potentially pricing some buyers back out of the market. Government policy will also be crucial. Any changes to stamp duty relief, help to buy schemes, or mortgage regulations could significantly impact the market. There's ongoing debate about how much the government should intervene in housing markets versus letting market forces operate freely. What's clear is that the current combination of policies, market conditions, and buyer determination is working to get more people onto the property ladder. The broader economic picture remains uncertain with global instability, potential recession risks, and ongoing inflation concerns. However, housing markets don't always move in lockstep with the wider economy. Sometimes, uncertainty actually drives people toward property as a tangible asset in unpredictable times. The desire for security and control over your living situation becomes even stronger when everything else feels uncertain. So where does this leave us? The UK housing market is experiencing something genuinely significant. After years of being locked out, first-time buyers aren't just participating in the market, they're dominating it. They're the ones driving transactions, setting the pace, and reshaping how the market operates. This isn't a small shift, it's a fundamental rebalancing that could define the housing market for years to come. The generation that was told they'd never own homes is proving everyone wrong. They've saved harder, waited longer, and been more determined than anyone gave them credit for. Now they're finally getting their reward. Whether this represents a permanent shift or a temporary window of opportunity remains to be seen. What's undeniable is that right now, in this moment, first-time buyers are the most powerful force in UK property, and they're making the most of it.